All right, all right, all right. Here we are, ready to go, ready to find out if 3 weeks of hard labor is going to pay off in a smooth running engine. Or an engine that will even start. No, it's going to start. It's going to be fine. But I have everything hooked up. I have all of the fluids done and filled. The ball valve is turned on so that the cooling water will flow once the engine starts. All the electrical is hooked up. The batteries are charged. The carburetor is primed. I'll take you back to the back to see how that looks. Let me get all the fire extinguishers out of the way. I'm expecting a bonfire, I think. So here is the back all hooked up. As I said, the ball valve is turned on so the water can flow. I had originally said that I was going to put the raw water filter over on that side, but instead I put it right there, which I think will work fine. So you can see that the hose of the incoming water, bringing the incoming water to the raw water pump, coming out of the raw water pump and delivering it to the water pump. Like I said, all the electrical's hooked up, and we're ready to give her a try. You ready? Let's do it. See what happens. Hello, everybody. It's Lloyd on board Lima Charlie, and finally getting a video together for my channel and for you guys that watch. And I hardly know where to start because there's been a lot happening since the last time I published a video. If you'll recall, in the last video I had reinstalled the engine and hooked up the basic part of the engine, the cooling, etc., the wiring, and all of that, and everything seemed like it was going smoothly and wonderfully, and it looked like the motor was gonna run good, and I just had a lot of optimism as to how things were going to go from the time that I got the motor back in. But as fate would have it, that didn't happen. So as it turns out, my problems was electricity and electrical, which is the area that I know very little about. I'm learning out of having to, but there's a lot about electrical current and resistance and different things like that that I just simply don't understand. And to be perfectly honest with you, I would rather not even have to know those things. I'll take mechanical issues any day over electrical. But I was faced with that, and so the engine didn't start, so I began investigating, and there were some things that, in spite of how careful I was to make sure that all of the wiring that I removed was labeled and where it went back to, and that kind of thing, but inevitably there were one or two wires that were not hooked up where they needed to go. But the main thing that turned out to be my problem was these two gauges. The other one's sitting down there next to me. But these are old, what was labeled on YouTube, or not on YouTube, but on the internet, these were labeled as Stuart Warner vintage gauges. And from what I can tell, Stuart Warner is no longer in business. And if you'll take note of the 4 poles here that need to be hooked up in order for this gauge to work properly. If you go to Google Images or anywhere else online for that matter, looking for the wiring diagram as to how these are supposed to be wired, you won't find it. You'll find plenty of Stuart Warner gauges, but none of them like this. Or at least I couldn't find them. So every time that I would hook up power to this gauge, no matter, and the other one, this is oil and the other one is fuel. No matter how I hook them up, I would blow a fuse, a 40 amp fuse, which is what's in an inline fuse going from the back of the motor to the instrument panel. And of course, the power is fed from the battery bank. So anyway, I finally got to the point after going through, and I'm not lying, about 10 or 12 40 amp fuses. I finally decided, after hooking up all of the other gauges that worked just fine, I finally decided I was going to have to replace the fuel gauge and the oil pressure gauge. I did replace those, and lo and behold, everything works. So that's where I am right now. All of the instruments work. I built a new instrument panel. I'll show you a picture of the old instrument panel and what it looked like, and I'm sure you will agree with me that it needed to be completely replaced, both the panel, many of the gauges, and all of the wiring. And so that's what I've been up to. And today I just finished organizing all of the wiring, bundling it together, and unbelievably everything seems to be working good, knock on wood, because it's been hell, I will tell you. So I thought what I would do today is give you a walkthrough and let you see what everything looks like now, take you on a little tour down into the lazarette, and let you see what my next project is. But for now, stand by and we'll begin a little. Okay, so here we are back in the quarter berth, looking at the junction bar that I've described before. And here are where all of those wires join up with the wires that come from the various sensors and places on the motor. They combine here or join here, and then they go from here up through this dark black hole over here and up into the cockpit to where the gauges are. And in all seriousness, I do know where they go and I do know how they're supposed to work. But I think that over the past 40 some odd years, since this wiring and this boat almost entirely has gone untouched, some things have been touched and some things have been touched in the wrong way and put back together incorrectly. So I'm basically starting from scratch, and I'm going to replace all of the ends, and I'm going to use a schematic provided by Moyer Marine and a couple of other Atomic 4 motor owners, and I'm going to rewire this area back up to the cockpit. I'm replacing a couple of the instruments. I'm replacing the instrument panel. And so there's a lot of work going on here, but hopefully this is the last step before I'm able to use the boat on a regular basis while I'm working on it, doing some other things like beautifying the boat and that kind of thing. So let me take you to my garage and I will show you the new instrument panel and the old instrument panel
and I think you'll be able to see why I'm replacing it. And I'll show you the instruments and how I've cleaned them up and replaced them, and et cetera, et cetera. So let's go to my garage. All right, welcome to my garage for a little bit of show and tell. So this is the old instrument panel that was in the cockpit that held the instruments and the on-off switch, which is so nicely signed, as you can see. And the throttle cable goes through here. So I knew I wasn't going to reuse that because it looks like garbage. So I took a spare piece of aluminum, being the aviation guy that I am. I have some leftover aluminum, and I cut out the new instrument panel, and I'm getting ready to sand and paint that. And here's the instruments that will be installed into the boat. Got a tachometer here. That's the old one, and it's still in good shape, so we're going to go ahead and reuse that. Here is the old fuel gauge, and we're still going to use that. I cleaned it up. It looks pretty darn good. Here is a brand new Hobbs gauge, which gives you, or reads the, records the engine hours. That's new. I don't have the old one because I think it was so disgusting I threw it away. Here's the new water temp gauge. Here is the old water temp gauge. And here is the ammeter, and that is the old one, but again, it cleaned up nicely and we'll be able to reuse that. And then lastly is the oil pressure gauge. The old one, it cleaned up nicely, so we're going to reuse that. And I have to tell you an interesting story. Right here is where the light fixture goes into each of the gauges to light up the instruments in the dark. And this is what the old one looked like. And as you can see, it's all rusted and just trashed. I don't think any of the lights worked. But I went down to an electronics supply store, and lo and behold, I was able to find not the same kind of lighting fixture, but the most important part is that it fit perfectly in here. And so I'm looking forward to seeing that illuminated to see what it looks like. And then lastly, I bought a new on-off switch, which is a push-pull. And we're going to be installing that, and then the very important push button start. So we're set to redo all of this, and before we move on, I want to show you some pictures of what the instrument panel looked like before, and you'll be able to understand why I was so moved to replace everything. So guys, if you ever want to test out your relationship with your wife or significant other, do something like this. Put this kind of a spread out on the dining room table, and if your wife tells you to clean it up and get it off and take it back to the garage, then you need to do some work on your relationship. But on the other hand, if she says, oh, that's okay, you can finish it up and then clean up after you're done, then you know you're in a good place. But then if she sees a mess like this and she comes over and smacks you upside the head, then it's time to clean up your mess, take it to the garage, and don't ever do it again. But as for me, my wife isn't home right now, so she hasn't had a chance to see this. But I have a feeling that when she gets home, she's going to roll her eyes and she's going to say, "I'm going upstairs. Tell me when you're done." Anyway, here is the new instrument panel with the new and old instruments in it. And I've completed some of the wiring, mostly having to do with the instrument lighting. But let me show you the front of it. So there you go. What do you think? Looks a hell of a lot better than the last piece of crap that was on the boat. So anyway, I'm going to finish up wiring it, and then we'll take it down to the garage and hook it up to a battery and give it a test and see if we blow anything up. As you can see, when I took the wires off of the instrument panel and out of the boat, I labeled each one, where they came off of and where they are supposed to go back onto. The only problem with that plan is that I'm going to wire the instrument panel up differently than it was, so this labeling only helps to a certain degree. So here is the Moyer Marine schematic of how to hook up wiring from the motor to the instruments. And then there is a gentleman that was on the Moyer Marine forum site, and he came up with this schematic for his boat, and he said it worked very well. He's been using it for 30 years. So I'm going to lean more towards this one, although I'm certainly going to refer to this one in case I get in trouble. But this one, as you can see, has a starter switch with a key and that kind of thing, like you would start your car. This guy has the same kind of setup that I'm going to have and that I've had, which is an on-off switch and a push to start. So anyway, I thought I'd share that little site with you, and we'll check back in when we've gotten a little further.
Okay, you've all waited long enough to hear this motor run, so I'll go through the start procedure with you, and you guys can hear this thing run for the first time. So to start the motor, first thing I do is I get down into the hole here and turn the raw water intake on-off valve to the on position so that cooling water can begin to flow into the motor once it starts. Next, I go to my battery selector switch. You can see it says 1, both, and just 2. So number 1 is the start battery. Both, obviously, is both batteries, the start battery as well as the house battery. And number 2 is just the house battery. So if you were anchored someplace and you didn't have any external power coming into the boat, then you would put the selector on number 2 here. But for starting purposes, we put it on 1. You can see it come alive. It gives me a battery status indication here. You can see that my Navcom radio comes alive. And I'll show you real quick here, and I failed to mention it previously. This is my battery bank, and those are 2 brand new batteries that I just replaced within the last couple of weeks. I also put the battery trays for the batteries to sit in, and you can see that there's a nut on each end of the battery to hold the batteries in place. So that also helped the performance of everything when I replaced those batteries. They were 2017 vintage. So, okay, so we're on number 1 here. Everything's powered up, ready to go. I turn on the blower, which blows any fumes or whatever out of the engine compartment, and it exits out the transom, the back of the boat. So next I come up to the cockpit, to the new instrument panel. I pull out my choke just a touch. Then I turn on my power, and you can see the instruments come alive. I set my throttle to just slightly open, and then I come back and push the start button. And there she goes. You can see the exhaust water exiting the transom. So that tells me that the engine is processing cooling water as it enters the boat. Good on fuel, turning about 1700 RPM. Oil temperature, or excuse me, water temperature, engine temperature is coming up. I've got about 30 psi. Amperage is a little bit on the discharge side, but that's fine. That's going to build as the batteries get charged. I've got 1 hour on the motor since I did all the work. And like I said, this is a new gauge, so it starts obviously at 0. Choke handle, start button, on off. Let's go down below and take a look. You can hear she's humming along and running just fine. Nothing at this point in time is leaking, it's just a world of difference from when I first got the boat almost a year ago. Let's go down into the hole. This is where I've been spending a lot of hours. Here are the wires coming from the motor that you just saw, and this is where they go to. So you can see everything that you see here is brand new, with the exception of the ammeter gauge right here. Amazingly, this ammeter gauge, which is also a vintage Stewart Warner gauge, it actually works. So this is the only gauge that I was able to get working, and it does work, and it works pretty good, it seems. So one of the things that I did differently this time around is I installed a bus for the negative and positive wires. Before, the gauges were wired from one to the next, to the next, to the next. And I don't know if that's to Coast Guard code or not, but I didn't like it. And when I was in the airplane building business, I always used bus bars. So this works very well, and it's nice and organized. You'll see a couple of loose wires here, like I have a loose light that was to go to one of the other Stewart Warner gauges, but will no longer be necessary. These two wires here go to the lights for the new gauges that I replaced, and I haven't wired those up yet, but I'm not worried about lights at this point. Anyway, while we're down here in the hall, I'll show you a couple of things that are going to be happening here. This is the exit for the bilge pump. So if water builds up in the bilge, it will get sucked out or pushed out by the pump, go through here, and then go out the transom, the back of the boat, which you can see there. And the next project is going to be to clean all of this. I've already cleaned over here, but I'm going to clean out here in the back so that I can literally get down here and lay down in this area and do whatever I need to do. One of the things that I'm going to do, and this is going to be the next project, is I'm going to take everything that you see that goes through the transom back here. That's all going to come off or out, and I'm going to sand the back of the transom, the back of the boat, and I'm going to sand it and paint it, and I'm going to put the new name on there. Right now it still has the old name, which is Naftaki, when I have no idea what that means, but anyway, it's going to be Lima Charlie. So we'll be doing that and starting to make the boat look nice as well as work nice. So that's it for now from down in the hole, and I hope that you guys will enjoy the video, and I'll continue to keep you updated, and we'll talk to you soon.